Didn't I tell people? Didn't I warn you that this would be one of the worst years for the movie industry in terms of box office returns ever? Yes, I did warn you, and apparently I've been validated from that because there have been multiple articles coming out from the most major entertainment news sources out there talking about how Hollywood is in its greatest depression, about how even after the strikes, there is still not a lot of work out there for people. There is not a lot of production going on. You don't even have to go to these articles to see that though. If you go to TikTok or Twitter, people who work in the industry, or better still, have worked in the industry, are saying that they have been out of work for a year and that they were out of work before the strikes happened and that they're still out of work now and that they have applied for jobs and jobs and jobs and they can't get anything, and that it is such a bad place right now in terms of, especially if you are a person who lives in LA and is trying to live in LA with the cost of living being as high as it is now. People just can't get work in the entertainment industry, and so much of LA's economy is the entertainment industry, and so that is another sign of LA being in a very, very bad place now, but I digress. And there are some people out there who are a bit in denial about just how bad it is for the movie industry right now, and I keep telling them it is really, really bad, but the people I'm referring to are mainly people who love watching indie films, and guys, I love watching indie films and smaller films and more obscure films as much as the next film connoisseur, but that does not make me in a state of denial about how bad the film industry is. And what I've talked about before, when you're talking about indie films, those are from people, just struggling to get funds for it, just struggling to get anyone to see it. Those are not going to keep an industry alive. The big blockbusters, the stuff that are meant for the mainstream, that's where things are really struggling. And we've seen it through the years. Obviously COVID happened, and obviously theaters had to shut down, and people thought that would be the death knell for the movie theaters. But then they had a bounce back. They had movies come out like Spider-Man No Way Home and Top Gun Maverick, and it seemed very clear that people were willing to go to theaters again. But then we got to 2023, and that is when it got really, really bad. And we got the worst summer at the box office that I've ever seen before. This was all covered here. The Flash, Indiana Jones, Blue Beetle, The Little Mermaid, all of these films that Hollywood had lined up week after week to be these big blockbuster movies to get a lot at the box office, either all bombed or severely underperformed. And in some cases, this was from not getting very high a box office return, but in a lot of cases, it was from the fact that they had just given too much in terms of budgets to these films. The Little Mermaid made about $500 million at the box office around that area, and it might have been profitable. That is not big profit, and that they just spent way too much on this movie because they were expecting it to be a billion-dollar film, and that's why it set them up for failure. The same thing happened with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, also in the $500 million range. Once again, maybe it wouldn't be a terrible disaster, except that they had their sights set so high on how much this movie was going to make that they weren't, and they had their budget so high, though that might have been due to COVID, that they couldn't handle it when the movie underperformed. And the same thing with Indiana Jones, which might be one of the most expensive blockbusters ever released in terms of the expense that it was to the studio that released it because of just how much they spent on it. And we could say the same thing for how much was spent on The Flash. And then this year, it just looks so bleak at the box office. Dune Part 2, very positive reviews, but right now it's being praised and praised like crazy for just getting into the $600 million range. Maybe it'll push to $700 million, but for a movie that is one of only two movies that could be the big blockbuster of the year, that is bad. Remember when movies were just getting $1 billion after $1 billion? That was the way it was in 2019. Not so anymore. Now you're lucky and praised if you got into the $600 million range. And I remember when that would be considered underperforming for a big blockbuster. The only other movie that is going to be released this year that might pull its weight is Joker 2, but that has a big question mark on it because we're not sure how people are going to react to the musical element. We're not sure how the movie's going to turn out because it is very different. Definitely seems to have some interest around it, but we have to see. But even if that movie is a big success, there just isn't much coming out this year at all. And last year, I was going to the theater left and right at least, even as bleak as it was then, but now it's like there's just nothing out. But what's worse about that is not only is there nothing out, but according to these articles and the state of the industry, not a lot is going into production. And that's interesting to me because it's like, for example, I've been talking a lot about X-Men, but you would expect after the show came out and got very high praise that Marvel would really be thinking about getting an X-Men movie off the ground, but we've heard absolutely nothing. They're doing a Thunderbolts movie that no one asked for, and they're doing a Fantastic Four movie that sounds very, very different from what people would expect it to be. And so that's why it looks so bleak right now, is that we saw this big crash coming. And let me tell you, it's just a big build up to it to see this happening, that there was going to be a time in the industry where there just would not be a lot of movies coming out that people want to see because they set themselves up for failure. But now we're not seeing much going into the production in the future, and that is what's making Hollywood just a non-existent industry to work in, from what I understand. But first, let's talk about why it's happening. It's happening, and I think that we're beyond the point where we can really blame COVID. Yes, that happened, but that was like 4 years ago. We've had plenty of time to bring the industry back. And other people would say, and a lot of people in the industry apparently think this way, that it's just because people don't want to see movies anymore, that they're becoming obsolete. As Natalie Portman, famous Star Wars actress, put it out there, she thinks that TikTok and YouTube have replaced people's interests and that movies are no longer the most mainstream, the top form of content that people want to consume. Now, the fact that she said that, and the fact that other people in the industry have alluded to this, there was an interview last year with Margot Robbie talking about how she hears that from the industry all the time now, that people just don't watch movies anymore. We even heard that from the Golden Globe speech from Ricky Gervais, saying that everyone's watching Netflix, but after that it appears that no one's watching Netflix, no one's watching Disney Plus, no one's watching Hulu, no one's watching Max, because they've all cannibalized themselves. That lots of people in the industry recognize that people are running away from what I will just call it for now, their products, so to speak. But I disagree highly that it is the fault of social media that is why people aren't watching movies. And the same thing goes with streaming. They used to, they always find something else to blame in terms of why things are failing. And first it was streaming that was to blame, that people weren't going to theaters because streaming was so accessible. Now streaming's not working out. Now they are blaming TikTok and YouTube. Now, let me tell you this, as someone who is a Gen Zer, just barely qualifies as a Gen Zer, who is a part of these groups that they like to blame that, people just want to watch streaming, and now, no, people aren't watching streaming, people just want to watch TikTok and YouTube. Look, I admittedly probably spend a lot more time on YouTube and TikTok than I do watching movies. Why? Well, I don't spend any time on TikTok, but I'm just saying, shorts, short form content, just because it's really easy and accessible and lazy to just have it on in the background while I'm doing stuff, or to listen to stuff, or to just watch stuff very quickly. But that doesn't mean that movies aren't my favorite form of content, and that I don't want to be going to the theater constantly, and that I don't want to be watching good movies constantly. My problem with the whole argument that it's YouTube and TikTok causing this big decline is you're not acknowledging that TikTok and YouTube offer very different kinds of content. They don't offer stories necessarily, unless you count those like Reddit stories from YouTube Shorts. They offer entertainment, to be sure, but a lot of it is like what I would call akin to reality entertainment, seeing what people are doing in their lives, silly short form videos, informative videos, a lot of stuff like that. They don't really tell stories in the way that TV and movies do. And that is my big argument here, is that, people might go to TikTok and Shorts and YouTube for short form content because their attention spans are lower and they just want to flip through that. But you are not getting the same kind of content through those things as you are from a movie, from a TV show. And what I'm getting at here is people who want stories, who want fiction, that's not going to go away. And those sorts of things offer something different than what you're going to get from YouTube and TikTok. And I don't think that the appetite for stories is ever going to go away. And I especially say that, and I made this point before, that there are these instances, Top Gun Maverick, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Kanto, regardless of where they're successful, whether it's on streaming or in the theater, these movies come out and they get to massive success. And the reason is because they're good movies. And, sometimes it's not always the case that a good movie sells. And that's the big problem with Hollywood, because they don't really understand what sells and what doesn't. Godzilla X Kong is a movie I was recently made to go see by my dad and brother, and it was awful. I sat sat through it and it felt like a hole was being drilled in my brain. It felt like the contents of my brain was being spilled out and I was just holding what was left of it in my hand. I have never fallen asleep in a movie in the theater, and I didn't fall asleep when I was at this movie, but I desperately wanted to go to sleep because it was just so boring and so brain dead, and it made me feel like an idiot sitting there watching it. But Godzilla x Kong is one of the highest grossing movies of the year, still in the $600 million range. But yes, people will go see a dumb movie, and this is what Hollywood has a problem with, is they can't really discern the content that sells and the content that doesn't. My big argument is that good content does sell. It's what people keep going back to over time. And yes, occasionally people will like something that's just dumb for the sake of being dumb, but usually good content sells. What really connects people with stories and what makes them want to go back to them and what makes them meaningful is that they will have characters that they can connect with, stories that they will connect with, and have a meaningful experience with that. Why was Encanto popular? Well, among a lot of other things, good music and good animation and all that, but it was a very relatable story in terms of a girl who felt like she didn't belong in her family and she desperately wanted to belong, desperately wanted to live up to their expectations that she couldn't, but and she discovered that this was a problem that her family had in not accepting her grandmother in particular, not with herself. So that was a relatable storyline. And you go back to superhero movies and why they were popular. Why was Spider-Man No Way Home popular? Well, yes, there was a lot of nostalgia bait in it, but going back to why the character of Spider-Man in general is popular, it's because he's a character who really related to the anxiety that young adults feel, and the pressures, and the feeling that even as much as you try to do the right thing, you will never win in the end. But it isn't about yourself, it's about what you're doing for other people. That is why Spider-Man was such a powerful character, and Spider-Man No Way Home, even though it had its flaws, really fed in to those feelings. And that is what connects people with stories and what makes them want to watch them and immerse themselves in them and, immerse themselves with these characters. If you're into a TV show or a series, you can immerse yourself into what do these characters do on their time off? Like, or what's the minutia of what a character is thinking and feeling? When fans really love something, then they want to get into it and want to get into all the details and speculate on what characters are feeling, because these characters become real in a sense to them, and it becomes a way for them to relate to something and explore these emotions and come to these understandings. And that's what stories are all about, and that's what people seek out. But Hollywood does not understand that. At least the modern era of Hollywood does not understand that. Now, a lot of people will say that politics are the big problem with movies these days. Hot take, I disagree that that is the big problem. I think that it is a problem with quality. I think it is a problem with not understanding how to get something to connect to an audience, and I think that it is a problem with not making the kinds of movies that anyone wants to see. I think that that is the big problem with it, because listen, politics is very much imbued into all stories, and you talk about recently talking about X-Men and people trying to say that it was never political. The most popular iterations of the X-Men have always had political undercurrents. Star Trek has always had political undercurrents. There have been political undercurrents in Star Wars. Even if someone seeks out to make something very apolitical, it's impossible for someone's own beliefs to not seep into. Top Gun Maverick was considered an apolitical film. One could argue it was a very conservative film. It was a very pro-America film. It doesn't really matter what side of the aisle or religious persuasion or social persuasion something is coming from. Politics are always going to be a part of things. The issue is how you do them. And so if people are noting that politics have been done worse lately, it's likely due to the people behind the scenes not being very competent in writing, and that is what I see as the through line. Because when I watch movies and TV shows, I rarely come away with the feeling that, oh, that was just too politicized. Yes, I do have a problem with how much we walk on eggshells in terms of talking on certain subjects, but I usually just come away in the movies that I look and see in the theater that I've sat through, that I've walked out of, not walked out of, but just come away from, is that there's just not a lot of good movies out there. There's not a lot of good TV shows out there. There's not a lot that make me feel like I have a connection with anything. I recently reviewed Avatar: The Last Airbender, the first episode, and I didn't want to watch anymore because they were so incompetent with their writing that they didn't understand how to show and not tell, that it made it so I couldn't be immersed in the story at all. And even, I'm enjoying X-Men 97, but even that show has its flaws. And I think that that really speaks to a problem with Hollywood, is that there's just such a misunderstanding about what a story is, how to make it compelling, how to make it feel like an experience to people and a worthwhile experience. And that is the main problem. They don't see these shows and these movies as stories, and they don't understand fiction. They just see them as content and more content that they need to spew out. And that was one of the big things that was caused by the streaming wars, is that Netflix was very popular and it did have a lot of good shows on it, but then things were split up. The movies and the franchises people enjoyed were split up to these different streaming services that they couldn't afford, and the entire goal from these streaming services seemed to be how much content can we put out at once? Not if it's good, not what does the audience want, how much content can we put out? And that's what these articles talk about a bit. And how many shows have you seen released out, if you pay attention to this stuff, that were told as this is really popular and this is really well received, but then were canceled on like their second season? So many shows I've heard of were canceled, and it's because these streaming services would just unstrategically spew out so much content without any thought about if it's connecting with people, if it's forming a big audience, if people are invested in it, just to have more content, just to keep people hooked. And it didn't work. And the best example of that, I think, is what Marvel tried to do with Disney Plus. And we hear this behind the scenes, that they just tried, that the goal was to just make as many shows as fast as possible. And that's what we saw on Disney Plus. And there was no rhyme or reason to what this connects to. It was just get the next show out and get the next show out. No rhyme or reason of were these shows going to have multiple seasons. Just get the next show out. And what happened was it turned people off, and there was just too much content. It was too confusing. They never focused on a show to just build up and make sure that people were invested in it, and people just don't pay attention to these shows. People aren't even really paying attention to what's happening with this media in general, because there is nothing that has been presented to them that has been of value to them. And so now, I'll just use X-Men 97 as another example. It's got its audience, but it's still not nearly as big as it could be, because people just aren't watching Disney Plus in general. These streaming services have cannibalized themselves. And so now we're seeing the fallout from that, is as people were asking for change in the strikes so that they would be considered as the changing landscape from cable to streaming, and how that would affect their pay. But now we're in a new era where Hollywood has to contend with their mistakes, where less and less content is being put out in general because they cannibalize themselves. And now there's just very little out in general. And it seems like they're sluggishly going along and just not understanding how to fix it. And what it all can come down to is bad business practices, because yes, bad hiring practices, bad storytelling, bad writers, that is bad business. Spewing out so much content so that you don't really focus on just a select amount of shows really appealing to people and bring them in, that is bad business. The streaming services cannibalizing themselves is bad business. Not considering what people actually want to see is bad business. I keep saying this, but I'll say it again, and I'll say it again and again and again, because it needs to be repeated. But if you think that people just aren't going to the theaters or watching streaming services because they just aren't interested in this type of content, I'll ask you, okay, where is the Back to the Future of the film of today? Where is the Terminator? Where is the Star Wars? Where is the Iron Man? Where is the Avengers? Where is the Titanic? Where is the Wait Until Dark? Where is the Psycho? Do they really make a lot of movies like Top Gun Maverick, which was really successful at the box office? What about even just smaller comedies that used to be successful, like 10 Things I Hate About You or Clueless? Because when I look to the past, I am far more likely to find an entertaining film in an era that I wasn't even born in than I am now. They do not know how to make entertainment anymore. They don't know what it is to make a movie entertaining, because they don't understand what a story is. They don't understand what connects. They only see these things as products and content. Selling fiction is different than any other business in the world. You can't treat it like you're selling toothpaste or selling hamburgers. You need an understanding of what fiction is and why it connects with people. But the scary thing is, and this is where it gets really depressing, is like we can do nothing but watch, and these executives hold all the power. Another horrible thing, horrible business practices we're hearing about, the abuse of CGI. People have talked about how they don't have enough time to finish it, how Hollywood has become over-reliant on CGI, how even as they try to cheap out when it comes to things like that and try to just, rush productions, that productions are just so expensive. And part of that is because of reshoots, lack of plans, lack of care when it comes to the scripts. Also, the amount of executives that they have, attached to each project, trying to make money off of each project. Just so many people that don't even need to be there that bloat the project. So much management that bloats the projects, and not finding the creators who actually know how to tell these stories and actually know how to do them well, and working with them to create the best story possible. No, everything is bloated down, everything is corporatized, everything is restricted. And that's what's really, really depressing to anybody who cares about the movie industry, is because we are helpless to do anything against the decisions from the higher ups, even as they see that they want to make money now. I'm not sure if they can, because as is a through line through this video, so often in the past, executives just take the wrong lessons from a film or a TV show's success or failure. They never really analyze what really connects people to stories. Even when it comes to bad things like Godzilla x Kong, understanding why a bad movie would still make a lot of money. I'm all about analyzing and understanding what makes people gravitate towards stories, no matter what they are. We're going to have a video coming out about the Star Wars prequels and why, with all the flaws of those movies, they still have people gravitate towards them. But so that's what my big intrigue is, discovering what makes people connect to things and why. But Hollywood executives don't do that. They look at the most superficial things. They look at movies like the Marvels and the Madam Web and say, well, people must just not like female superheroes, and everyone's considering, maybe your movies were really, really, really bad. And so that's what's really depressing about it, is that we're in this great Hollywood depression, which has been coined that by the industry now, but we don't see any cause to change that. And they're not making the movies that anyone wants to see. For years, they invested in these Disney remakes and these Marvel movies, and that was all that they would invest in. They wouldn't allow anything original to come out. They wouldn't take a risk with anything. And now they have cannibalized that, because people have seen that Disney remakes and, Marvel movies and even the Disney animated movies. I used to love going to Disney animated movies and Disney Pixar movies, but now I just always expect them to be bad, because that's what they've shown, and they just have such a bad track record now. They threw all their eggs in that basket. They made billions of dollars, but they set themselves up to failure, because eventually, because there was no understanding of quality, there was no cohesion with the quality. People watched Marvel movies and Disney remakes and Disney movies and Warner Brothers movies and Paramount movies. They watched their quality tank, or they just watched these franchises get old and they started losing interest. And so now that is where Hollywood is left, where they have nothing left. They've milked nostalgia for all it's worth, so to speak, and now there's nothing left to pull from to make money off of. And now they just seem stuck in a rut where they're like, well, what do we do now? And, judging from what a lot of people say, they still don't understand. And that's what's really depressing. Now, to make sure that I'm not ending this video on a depressing note, I will use a quote that is actually from Aang from The Legend of Korra. And I haven't watched all of The Legend of Korra, but I know this quote from it. But it's a quote from the character Aang from The Last Airbender. And he said, it is at our lowest point that we are open to our greatest change. And that's what is exciting about seeing a part where the movie industry has had so many problems for so many years, not even with their business practices, but just behind the scenes drama, scandal, horrible things happen. But to see it get to a low point is an exciting time, because that means that change will happen. Now, will it happen from executives finally waking up and, knowing what to do, or from new executives coming in? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it'll happen from us indie filmmakers rising up and figuring out a way to get our films promoted so that can be the new films. And maybe indie creators, maybe we're the next big step. Either way, that is a way to find a ray of sunshine in all of this. And, I really feel for the people who have worked in Hollywood for years and are now messed over by all of this and don't know what to do because they've got families to feed. And I just have myself to take care of right now, really. So I don't know how difficult that situation must be in. But for me, as a person who wanted to work in TV and movies for so many years, I'm kind of now relieved, because I'm seeing, if I had gone over there and worked, I would have been out of work for like forever, because then COVID happened, and then the fallout from that happened, and the streaming cannibalization happened, and the strikes happened, and now this Hollywood Great Depression has happened. So I'm actually glad to be in my position of just making indie films, and I'm almost finished with that feature film script I keep telling you guys about. That's a suspense thriller, and as I'm going to show you some clips here, I'm almost done with my next short short film that looks the best that it ever has, because I actually think I've gotten to a place where my cinematography looks halfway decent. And so I would just say for us indie creators, just do our best with it, and we're just going to have to figure out how to raise funds on our own and get these things out there without the Hollywood production thing right now, because that system is very, very broken as it is. But I'm still a big lover of movies, and I want to promote these, and I want to have good movies out there. That's all I've ever wanted. But I'm rambling now. That's all I got for you guys today. Once again, my short film is coming out very shortly. I put it off for months. Well, I didn't put it off intentionally. I just had video projects to finish, and that will be coming out very, very soon. And I hope that you guys will support that, even to just give me constructive criticism on it, because I just want to do the best work that I can out there. But as always, thank you patrons for supporting this channel. Thank you everybody who watched this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment if you agree with it, if you want to see more videos just like this. That is all I got for you guys today. I will have more videos out coming very soon, and I will see you guys next time.